The nation continues to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee today as a service of thanksgiving takes place at St Paul's Cathedral, whilst the Queen remains at Windsor Castle.
Good morning to you. It is 6 o'clock on Friday, the 3rd of June. It's, of course, a Jubilee Bank Holiday weekend. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne. Let's take you through the papers this morning. Start with the Times. A beaming Queen gets her party started as the first day of the Jubilee celebrations began yesterday.
The Express says incredible, showing an image of the Mall packed with crowds. Unbelievable photograph, that.
The Mirror says, wow, what a racket, great granny. It's that lovely shot of Prince Louis covering his ears as the flypast took place.
The Eye calls her the history maker as she becomes the first British monarch to mark 70 years on the throne.
Nutcases, says the Star. There is a picture of Her Majesty the Queen out there with the red arrows, we should point out.
Yeah.
But it's looking at travel chaos for holidaymakers. Airports are urging travellers just to take cabin bags if they want to avoid long delays.
Which I think is a good idea. The Guardian is reporting that the waiting lists for gynecology treatments have risen to over 500,000. It says doctors' routine dismissal of women's debilitating conditions causes problems elsewhere in the NHS.
And the Financial Times says major oil-producing nations have agreed to increase production over the summer to slow the rising cost of energy.
And the Ukrainians look to the long fight ahead after 100 days now of brutal, bloody combat, reports The Independent. The beleaguered nation has long exceeded expectations and is forcing Russia to pay dearly at every step.
Well, let's go through some of those papers now. Joining us now is Benjamin Butterworth from the I newspaper and the journalist Nabila Ramdani. Good to see you both this morning.
Actually, it's not just both, because that shot there showed Benjamin
with the Queen.
With the Queen in the background.
Yeah.
How do you know which is which?
Oh, dear. She's lurking over your shoulder.
Yeah. Let's start with the Times, Nabila, should we? And, I mean, some beautiful pictures of Her Majesty yesterday.
Well, absolutely. The beaming Queen is really a fitting title, as Her Majesty absolutely launched the beginning of a four-day Platinum Jubilee of celebrations across the nation. And indeed, a lot of foreigners keeping a very close eye on the events and enjoying every bit of it. And we learn in the Times that she's actually made appearances on the balcony since she was 13 months old.
That's right,
95 years ago.
Apparently she was first presented on the balcony when she was 13 months old. So
That's
she's pretty used to it.
She's pretty used to it, and she's enjoying it, clearly. I mean, unsurprisingly, you look at all the papers today, and, you know, there's absolutely, you know, they're full on of royal coverage. And so it should be. You know, I have to say that a lot of the time, you know, that people criticise the British press for all kinds of things, but there's no denying that it provides a fantastic public service when it comes to covering historical events like this. And, you know, we say about newspapers, they're often the first draft of history. And we have all the excitement here of what was a remarkable day of launching a marathon weekend of celebrations. And, you know, I was listening to your conversations earlier about you know, why is the British Crown so important? And, you know, in the end, we're talking about privileged family. But I think there's a great sense of history attached to the Crown. It's very much part and parcel of, you know, British history and indeed British tradition. I mean, the Queen is a massive chunk. She personifies a massive chunk of British history. And the institution of the Crown, in many ways, defines the British state and indeed the working of the British state. So it's a very delicate balance between, you know, the Crown, which is a huge part of British history. It effectively bounds the past with democratic values. And I think all the basic formalities, the bowing, the respect, the pageantry, are fundamental to bind it all together.
I don't know, I find it quite difficult to justify that. I mean, if she walked in here now, would you curtsy?
Oh
yeah, absolutely.
I'd
absolutely.
bow.
At the most basic level, out of respect.
Would you curtsy or bow?
I would. Look, I can't claim that I don't find it, you know, a little odd. You know, in the rest of our life, the idea of bowing or curtsying to another person, especially simply because of where they were born, would seem incredibly strange. But but for the fact of what it means about the country and the sense of history and the sense of identity that it gives you. That's why I love it. You know, there'd be 1,001 different things we could discuss this morning where we'd all disagree. And yet this is the one thing where the vast majority of the country just looks to the Queen, looks to these pomp and ceremony like we saw yesterday.
Yes, but I'm not sure they know why. Or there were all those people in the Mall yesterday saying, oh, isn't she wonderful? Isn't it brilliant? I'd do anything to be here. And you just think, why?
I know what you're getting at, but it isn't just the fact it makes us smile enough. You know, if you were designing a country from scratch, if I were anyway, I wouldn't put a monarchy in place, but given we've got one and given the joy that it brings, and I was thinking about it yesterday, you know, I've written a story for today's newspaper that there's 70,000 street parties happening over this weekend. 10 million people will go to an event. A lot of those people will be the elderly. There'll be people that live alone. You know, events like this are pretty much unique in reaching so many people that actually often get forgotten. You know, it really is a reminder of the community spirit. And I think for that alone, that's a good enough reason.
Yes, and also, you know, just listening to messages from world leaders who, you know, have played...
the Pope, the President of the United States.
From great republics,
Emmanuel
from
Macron,
America,
everybody
from France.
did it, didn't they?
So, you know, people absolutely adore that sense of pomp and circumstance, which, it has to be said, the British do superbly. And people, you know, came in their thousands on the Mall to watch the British Army parade, to watch all that, you know, beautiful
Benjamin,
display of
you've done the
traditions.
Mall thing, haven't you?
Yes, at the Diamond Jubilee. I mean, I was there when I was 18. I was at Parliament Square for William and Catherine's wedding, and then at the Diamond Jubilee, I was on the Mall, and I was walking at the very front as you go
You know,
up.
as the police let people walk
Precisely.
down. Yeah.
And then I was sort of face pressed against the railings, the gates of Buckingham Palace for the wave. And, you know, I'm so glad I did it because it's an extraordinary experience and just the sense of joy. And also, it's not just British people when you're in there. You have people from the whole world that turn up to be a part of that moment. And, you know, I've got a little selfie of me against the railings with the royals in the background. And
Have you? You should have brought it.
It's somewhere on my Instagram, but I think that's a photo that I'll treasure forever.
Well, before you come on in an hour's time, you must find it for us.
Dig it out.
Yeah. Tell us about Prince Louis, because you picked him out from the front page of the Mail.
Indeed. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the photos by now. Now, Louis is 4 years old, so, you know, as someone who's raised a couple of boys, you know that they're pretty hard to control at 4 years old,
Yes,
I dare say.
they could do anything to let you down, couldn't they?
Yeah, even the Queen couldn't control Prince Louis. But, yeah, those pictures of him with his hands over his eyes, he's like the little cheeky monkey emoji, right, in real living form. They're on the front pages of lots of the papers. And you were mentioning earlier about how it's probably not a coincidence they put the youngest and the eldest together. In fact, I was watching a photographer about when, I think it was William or Harry being born, and how he was sat on the knee of the Queen Mother, because they always like to have the oldest and the youngest together because, you know, it shows the lineage of the family. But I think that's one of the things that really charms the country, right? Because, you know, you see through the pomp, in a sense, and see the real family.
And, well, you saw a real relationship between the Queen.
It was really beautiful to see how he related so well with his great-grandmother, and also that he was allowed to be himself. You know, that was very beautiful to watch, and he was really amusing. He was already a bit of a character.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, I feel for him because I was just off the Mall. I was at home in my flat, which is around the corner, and the roar of the planes overhead was incredible. It was so loud. So, you know, I can understand why a 4-year-old is pretty intimidated.
But I
You'll have
can
to get
tell
used
you
to that.
sailor suit he was wearing will be sold out.
Well,
everywhere.
there are lots of pictures. It's identical to the sailor suit that his father wore at the same age. And there are a lot of fashionistas in the press this morning saying, I wonder if it's the same suit.
Oh, that would be
It could
interesting.
well be. I mean, it's a
Could
very
be.
traditional thing, and it's exactly the same age, the same sort of size. So maybe it's his dad's old sailor
Oh, that
suit.
would be nice,
Yeah.
in a way. Look, the disturbing story in the Mail, Nabila, they're looking at the protesters on the Mail yesterday who made a bit of a scene. They're asking, how did this manage to happen?
Yes.
But, I mean, my question with this last night when we were talking about it at home was, I mean, what do these people think they're doing? Because under these circumstances, they were very likely to have been shot dead by doing this.
Yes, it was, in fact, animal rights protesters who managed to get through the police cordon. They jumped over the barriers and got into the path of the military band as well, which I thought was a bit sad to disrupt the band, to be honest.
There was one bandsman, though, who actually just trod over him.
Yeah.
He just kept going. I don't know what he was playing, but he just went on going. They're clearly so well trained. He just kept on going. He stepped over this guy lying on the.
But you're quite right, Stephen. You know, I mean, protest is all part of democracy, of course, but it can get very dangerous at times. And it looked like it could have been likely that a lot of people watching were pretty scared at times.
It wasn't the day for it, was it?
And, you know, as it turns out, it was, I think, something called animal rebellion, a version of Extinction Rebellion. But no one around knows that when they run out there. And, you know,
No.
Having been to some of these celebrations on the Mall myself, I've always felt really anxious. You know, it is the most incredible number of people. How do the police manage to be sure that there aren't any threats, that someone hasn't turned up, God forbid, with a gun or something?
Well, they effectively...
You know, it is a great deal of trust in the public to bring us together like that.
Yeah, definitely. They effectively oppose Crown land being used in meat and dairy farming and indeed in hunting and fishing. And it has called on the royal family to rewild all Crown land. So that's the main
Well, I think Prince Charles is
message,
doing
if you
his
like.
bit for that sort of cause anyway, isn't he?
Yeah.
But I think the police handled it quite well. You know, I dare not imagine how it would have been handled in France, probably with baton charges and
Well,
tear gas.
interestingly, there were beacons lit all over the place, including France. I didn't know that.
There were, and also Emmanuel Macron stood for the British national anthem, which I thought was incredible.
He did?
Yeah, there's video of it if you can hunt it out, which I thought was incredibly classy. I have to say, I think you know.
Oh,
he showed
that's a
great dignity.
surprise, though, isn't it?
Well, he sent a lovely message, though, didn't
Oh,
he?
yes. He spoke of Her Majesty as the golden thread
Yeah.
linking the two countries. And he was
very
actually
generous,
very
wasn't he?
moving, because you hear a lot of people who, you know, they talk about the monarchy with a bit of a mocking tone, even those who actually support the monarchy. But there was a lot of sincerity in his speech, and he even lit a flame at the tomb of the unknown soldiers on the Champs-Élysées yesterday with the British ambassador to France.
We see that's what makes her the golden thread, because she did her bit in the war as well, and he was remembering that amazing camaraderie between France and Britain as allies during the war.
Absolutely. He gave Her Majesty a horse for the Platinum
Called-
Jubilee called Fabulous.
Fabulous. Oh, well, there you go.
And of course, it's because Edward VIII, when he abdicated, he went off with Wallace Simpson and lived on the outskirts of Paris until their death. So, you know, it's only because of them choosing to move to France that we ended up with Queen Elizabeth II in the first place.
Yeah, so there's quite a bond there, isn't there?
Look, we need to leave it there. Nabila, Benjamin, thank you. We shall catch up with you both a little bit later on. "7:40. Morning to you.
Morning,
It's nice
yeah.
to be... Man, you're a bit chilly this morning, aren't you?
It's blinking freezing in here, absolutely. I'm red, white and blue. The blue bits are my fingers and toes.
OK, let's have a look at the papers for you. And the Eye calls her a history maker. Her Majesty the Queen, of course, as she becomes the first British monarch to mark 70 years on the throne. It's a lovely picture.
It is. The Mirror says, wow, what a racket, great granny, because Prince Louis is seen covering his ears for the fly past.
The Mail says the crowd on the Mall should have been louder for Her Majesty, as the Queen will now miss her Thanksgiving service at St Paul's.
And there's the Telegraph with the lovely balcony scene there at the top. And they're calling it an absolutely glorious do. I tell you what, if you go inside the Telegraph, can I just show you this?
Hold this side.
This is the most incredible double-page spread. Can you see that shot? That's the red arrows flying over the Mall and Buckingham Palace with all of the beautiful greenery, the Green Park below you, and, of course, the buildings there in London. How did they get that shot?
I don't know.
Because if that was taken by a drone, which is all I can think it must be, then the drone must have been flying higher than the red arrows.
It must have had special clearance to do so.
Absolutely. It's
But
astonishing.
it's a fabulous shot. Absolutely.
I mean, there are
fabulous.
some wonderful photographs in the papers today. So if you're the sort of person who likes to have these sort of souvenir issues, absolutely brilliant. But the Daily Telegraph, they played the photographs huge, absolutely brilliant.
Really lovely. Well, let's go through some of those papers in a bit more detail with Benjamin Buttermouth from the I newspaper and the journalist Nabila Ramdani. Morning, both of you.
Good
morning.
Benjamin, let's have a look at the beacons, lighting the beacons in the Times.
Yes, and just to answer Anne's question, there were some helicopters filming it from higher and further away, so I suspect the photos
maybe
from
they
there, because they shared it on social media, some of the video of those moments from the helicopters. So I think it was that and not a drone. It'd be a bit nervous of a drone so high. But yeah, the beacon. So the last night you might have seen the Queen lit her beacon, which went up to a tree, and you had Prince William at Buckingham Palace. And I thought, it was someone kind of trying to think up something to do, frankly. It seemed a little bit odd, but it turns out it goes back to Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897. So there isn't a person on the planet who was alive to remember that. And apparently she's had these beacons at all of hers. And 54 nations around the world have lit them, about 3,000 of the beacons. So I think the idea is to show the stretch of her influence and of the people that admire her.
Have you seen the famous scene in Lord of the Rings movie where they light all the beacons? And beacons. I was brought up near a beacon, Malvern, on the Malvern Hills, and you get to know what a beacon is about. And it was always the only way to actually signal a whole. It was the early telephone, if you like. And if you lit a beacon, the next beacon, people who lived at the next beacon knew what the signal meant. And so the lighting of beacons is terribly important. It's a way of getting a message around the country. But I didn't know other countries were doing it too, which is great.
54, and I don't think that's simply the Commonwealth nations, because I think France has lit one. I think lots of countries have engaged with this, which is lovely. And I think, there's no one else, certainly no other Brit, for whom so many countries would want to do something like that as for the Queen.
And indeed, Nabila, in the Mail, they're looking at the tributes, including rather unusual tributes to Her Majesty the Queen.
Yes, indeed. We have the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, who joined a world tribute to, and he actually sent a letter to Her Majesty to congratulate her on 70 years of service. So even a rogue state like North Korea is actually an indication of how influential the Crown is throughout the world. And it can only be a good thing for Britain and its influence, and indeed its standing in the world. And, I mean, it has to be said that tributes were pouring up from all over the world, from great republics like America. We heard the American President Joe Biden, who said to Her Majesty, "You have inspired people with your selfless devotion and service to the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth." I think those two words, service and devotion.
He and his wife even went to the trouble of recording that video message, which I thought, I've never seen a president do anything like that before.
Well, the French president did the exact same thing.
Too.
He recorded a message
in
English, with a bit of French at the end. But
he could have done it because she's fluent in French, Her Majesty, isn't she?
Well, absolutely. She speaks very good French, and she has travelled to France a number of times. I've actually met her on her last trip in France.
In France?
In France, when she was in Paris, and I saw just seeing her gliding on her Rolls-Royce up the Champs-Élysées is quite a scene when you think about French presidents being driven in Renault cars and Citroëns. It contrasts quite sharply with the grand, sense of class, a true class that the Queen carries. And, any Queen's 70th birthday or anniversary, effectively, on the throne would be an astonishing event in itself, and it is especially so when we're talking about a monarch who's lived through such a rich and fascinating, not only British history, but also world history. And it has to be noted, even in the world tributes, even Sinn Féin's, the party vice president, Michelle O'Neill, she wrote, "Your Platinum Jubilee is a historic moment, especially for all those from the Unionist and British tradition on the Isle of Ireland, whom hold you very dear." And I think that's quite
something, isn't it?
The Queen is, of course, part of history, but she's also part of a changing history. And I think that's important here, that Sinn Féin, of course, has always been committed to the Republican struggle against the British Crown. But they accept that the world has changed drastically and quite dramatically during the Queen's reign, which is a representative of a changing world and also a world of reconciliation.
Yeah, and I feel like only someone like the Queen and the space that she occupies could inspire politicians to have such dignity. You know, I don't think anyone else would get them to behave like that. President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama recorded messages separately paying tribute to her, and Barack Obama said that the Queen is a gift to the world and truly one of the most special people I've ever met, in his words. You know, and you can tell that's authentic. One of the people that didn't send a message, despite claiming to love her so much, is President Donald Trump.
Didn't they?
No, but Melania Trump, late last night, put a tweet out saying Happy Platinum Jubilee. So I've got a sneaking suspicion they might have forgotten the occasion in advance.
Oh, dear.
Oh, busy doing something else. How embarrassing.
Yes. Look, we are a bit squeezed for time this hour, so we're going to have to leave it there, Nabila and Benjamin. But thank you. We will see you for a bit of a longer session, as it were, next time.
Absolutely.
Let's take a look at today's front pages. So let's do that, should we? The Times says a beaming Queen gets her party started as the first day of Jubilee celebrations began yesterday.
Yeah, the Express says incredible, showing an image of the mall packed with crowds.
The Mirror says, wow, what a racket, great granny. Gang they call her, apparently.
Really?
As Prince Louis covers his ears for the fly pass.
Oh, that's a good subject. What do you call your gran? Anyway, The Eye calls her a history maker as she becomes the first British monarch to mark 70 years on the throne.
Oh.
That's a good one, though, to ask you is, what do you call grandma in your family? Because lots of grandmas have funny names, don't they?
Yeah.
Gang is quite a well-known one. I mean, there's the nanas, and my mum was known as Bobo to my
Bobo?
children. Bobo.
Oh.
Don't know why.
I had Nana and Grandma.
Yeah, but then if you have two sets, you often call one set Nana and Grandpa, or Gran and Grandpa, or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you've got an unusual name for Grandma, do let us know. Great grandma she is as well to Louis.
Yes, let's find out what
Great gang.
Benjamin Butterworth of The Eye and journalist and broadcaster Nabila Ramdani make of it all. Good to see you both this one. I'm going to ask you, Nabila, in France, then, what do you call a grandmother or...
Grand-mère.
Grand-mère.
Mm-hmm. Sounds very nice, actually.
That sounds very formal. There must be shorter versions.
I call my mum Maman and my grandmother Mama.
Mama. Oh, that's interesting.
That's quite nice.
What about you? Did you?
Grandma.
Grandma.
Yeah. She's watching today, Myrna. She's watching.
Morning,
Excellent.
Grandma.
Morning, grandmas everywhere. And
Yes.
particularly great grandmas as well.
Nabila, Harry and Meghan in the Mail.
Yes, indeed. Harry and Meghan's comeback, public comeback anyway, since their decision to leave the UK in 2018, but no sign of peace yet. That's what Richard Kay writes about in the Mail. There was always going to be questions about whether the Sussexes' comeback would, they would hijack the limelight or upstage anyone. And I have to say, they came across very much as a very small sideshow. And as Richard writes in the Mail, they still managed to edge into sight through an open window where they had a VIP viewing of the trooping of the colour from the Horse Guards parade. They were pictured offering a playful shush as they knelt down to share jokes with Princess Anne's grandchildren.
But don't you feel that's a bit mealy-mouthed of Richard Kay in the Mail? He's sort of pointing out that they were lurking in the shadows, and yet if they hadn't lurked in the shadows, he'd be criticising them for coming out.
Well, technically, they were banned from being inside for the balcony ceremony and the trooping of the colour. So it was very, they were, I think, quite rightly kept away from the main event. Let's not forget they're not working royals anymore in any shape or form. On the contrary, they made very damaging public comments against an institution and indeed against the royal family itself. So I have no personal opinion on either of them as people, but I feel like if you have attacked an institution and it seems absurd then to turn up and pretend that you're there to support it. And at the most basic level, the claims or the allegations of racism they have made, they have not substantiated them with any evidence so far. So I think it's quite fitting that they should withdraw those accusations in order to be back in the fold in some way.
I just think it's. I mean, he sort of says, they sort of got snuck into the limelight in a very small way? Well, only if you're a photographer with a massive lens on your camera.
Well, it was a small way because they are, in the end, inconsequential pictures. They look rather awkward. They're effectively being put at the children's table.
Oh, no, I thought it was all right, that, to be
Well,
honest.
they come across as kids themselves playing with the kids. If you are making such a comeback as an influencer and fly all the way from California to attend such massive celebrations, you want to be with the adults. But I think it's fair to say that the adults were quite legitimately jittery at the thought of speaking to them because they might be quite worried about whatever they tell them, that it will end up being sold on a TV interview or as part of a Netflix and Spotify deal, I'm afraid.
And I think, maybe the picture at the window that you saw in the Mail is understandable, but there's this other photograph of Meghan in a car, and the window is pulled down and she leans right into the window so all the photographers can get the photograph of her being in London. Now, you remember, they wouldn't come back to this country because they said they didn't feel secure. It was absurd when it was the Duke of Edinburgh's memorial, as if, all the heads of state of European monarchies were there. I'm sure they would have been safe. But I tell you what, if they were that worried about security, she wouldn't have rolled the window down in public. It would seem pretty clear she was doing that to make sure photographers got the image of her in London.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not that cynical.
It's quite ironic that they were pictured telling the children to shut up when they have been told to shut up for months.
That's a good one, yes. True. It's very difficult to know, isn't it, whether to sort of forgive and forget. You don't mind forgiving and forgetting as long as they don't do any more. And I suppose
as long as there is some contrition.
And that's the thing, let's not forget, Prince Harry has a book coming out later this year. So maybe the Queen is hoping that this can iron out some of the problems and maybe he won't be as remarkable as he could be in that book. But the other story I've got here is that one person that wasn't invited was Kim Kardashian. I don't know if you've seen that.
I saw
She
that.
wasn't invited.
No.
Well, thank heavens for that.
She asked for an invitation, didn't she?
She did. So you've got the big
apparently.
concert at the outside Buckingham Palace on Saturday night, and you've got Diana Ross, Elton John, all those performing. And Kim Kardashian and her comedian boyfriend asked for tickets. They've flown into London for this week, and they were told, no, you can't come. So, Meghan's, I guess she's the only American that's getting anywhere near.
The Palace have probably
you-
never heard of her.
Why would you have the nerve to do that? I can't understand the gall of some people.
It's because they understand it as a showbiz event, I suppose, don't they?
Yeah.
So they think, we're on the A-list, why shouldn't we be there?
Yeah.
But I think, this idea of the royal family looking like the Kardashians, which is kind of what Harry and Meghan have done to it a little bit with the Netflix and Spotify and the rest of it, you can understand why the royals wanted to be a million miles from that. There are plenty of celebrities that are welcome to attend that. Julie Andrews will be in the audience, all sorts.
Oh, she
gave a lovely video message as well
Did
to
she?
the Queen.
Oh, I
yeah.
love Julie Andrews.
I know. She gave a lovely video message to the
it's
Queen.
nice.
It was really moving.
But
I feel like bursting into song.
I know,
there.
absolutely.
I should-
Dame Mary Poppins.
I should sing at a street party,
Yes,
Benjamin.
exactly. Apparently, there are 70,000 street parties planned over this 4 days, yesterday and the coming 3, of which 10 million people will attend. And you've got ones, there's one in Morecambe where there'll be 5,000 people along the seafront with 500 tables.
They know how to do it in Morecambe.
Yeah, exactly. Is that where you're from?
Well, not far
Near.
away.
That neck of woods. You've got them all over the country. And I just think, I said it in the first 6:31 we did, but, in many ways, the idea of the monarchy and the Queen is ridiculous. Of course it is. If you write it down on paper, you'd think, what on earth are you thinking? But it is basically the only thing that will get all these communities around the country, 70,000 streets.
That's true.
Over this weekend,
Yeah.
will have the elderly and the young and the often lonely sat together.
They wouldn't do
sharing
it for a Prime
cucumber
Minister or a
sandwich.
President, would they?
No, and you wouldn't even do it for something like the Olympics, right? You wouldn't get this scale of community. And, the whole thing might be ridiculous, but I think for that joy itself...
It's
worth it.
melodramatic, but it's meant to rise above politics, to unite people.
Yeah.
That's the thing, I think, rising above, because everything else in society and how we're ruled and governed is split, isn't it? As people vote, if you happen to vote for the party that's in power, well, great, but lots of people don't, of course.
Well, that's right. You have to like the royal family because nobody voted for
No one
them.
voted for them.
And you're right about the history thing, because there are two people left in this country who are Edwardians. And I tried to interview them both.
What?
Sadly, one of them was sick. There are 2 women, Ethel and Rose, who were born under Edward VII.
Wow.
So that's the grandfather of the one who abdicated.
Yeah.
They both live in Surrey. And
Well, how old must they be?
112, about to turn 113.
Wow.
So there are 2 Edwardians still alive today who have seen 5 monarchs.
That is amazing.
It really is.
That's-
I was talking to one of our guests yesterday down at the Palace. So you think the Queen's been on the throne for 70 years. The British monarchy stretches 1,000 years, give or take. So she has been our Queen for nearly 10% of the history of the British monarchy.
Yes.
Which,
That's
I mean, it's
extraordinary
It's
as well, isn't
remarkable. I mean, what a wonderful legacy. And, you know, it's just so important to celebrate and honour her, because she's quite an impressive leader in many respects. And that's why we've seen world leaders actually paying, you know, the most sincere tributes to her for her years, decades of devotion and indeed service. She sets a remarkable example, it has to be said.
Yeah,
It's
I think
extraordinary,
so.
isn't it? You know, you think about how old Joe Biden is, right? He's the oldest US president ever. Well,
76?
yeah, 76, 77, right? And he was obviously 6 or 7 when he won't even remember
That's
a
right.
world in which the Queen wasn't the Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's extraordinary longevity. She's been Queen for about the third of the length that the USA has existed, right? It's absurd when you put it in proportion.
crazy.
That is weird.
Crazy. Oh, well.
Apart from anything else, she's allowed us to talk about good news almost entirely throughout the programme this morning and all of yesterday. And we need that sometimes, don't
Sometimes
we?
we
We
just
know
do.
there are terrible things happening in the world and, you know, cost of living crises and all the rest of it. But you can submerge yourself too much in doom and gloom. And the Queen has lifted us well above all that.
She has.
Just for a while.
She has. Look, we've got to leave it there, Nabila, Benjamin. Thank you both
Thank you
very
very much.
indeed.